Bride of the Year. A lovely bride, clearly dressed to the hilt and happy as can be. The glass of drink provides a nice colour splash and the image is sharp as can be. The main issue here is the lack of structure in the shot, which was presumably taken on the fly without the luxury of posing or careful composition. The harsh sunlight hasn't done you any favours either, and the cluttered background tends to spoil the overall look of the image. It's always important to look beyond the main subject and to avoid distracting backgrounds. And acceptance. Flying high. The contours here are great, and the vantage point takes full advantage of a field of view denied to those on the ground. The wing of the plane provides context and helps to fill part of the expanse of sky. The print quality has not done justice to the original digital image, as detail has been lost. If you compare the underside of the wing, for example, you will see how much detail has been lost in translation. And acceptance. Road to the hills. This is a nicely composed image with the roadway leading us into the scene and the dramatic mountains providing the destination. The sky provides an additional element and the hues and textures combine to produce a pleasing image. I might have liked a little more width, but apart from that, it's a nice image. And acceptance. Shearing time. Not the sort of scene we city slickers see very often, and counting this number of sheep would send many to sleep. The dust cloud reinforces the sense of movement and provides action to the scene. It is a little soft rather than totally crisp, and it may have been a little better with a little bit more space on the right for the flock to move into. An interesting shot nonetheless. And acceptance. Tassie rocks. An unusual rock here, which looks slightly like a sculpture. The moisture makes everything in the image stand out and highlights the various tones and shades. The depth of field is good, focusing our eyes on the main subject. Perhaps a secondary focus might have been useful as the overall image needs a little more to maintain our gaze. The print is not as sharp as the digital version and perhaps you might need to revisit your printing to rectify this. And acceptance. That's the spirit. A good imaginative title. The image is well composed with both the foreground and background in focus. I'd probably consider cropping a little from the left-hand side as there isn't a lot there to maintain our interest. It may actually work with a tighter crop overall, just to concentrate on the main elements a little more. And acceptance. The port is right in town. The print has lost some of the sharpness of the original digital image, which is a shame, as the original is particularly crisp. There is a lot to see in the image, although it is perhaps a little cluttered. I do like the couple walking along the path, a small detail, but one that adds a bit of human interest. There is so much happening here that our eyes tend to flit from one thing to another. I rather like some of the individual elements here, but perhaps there are better vantage points you could have chosen to isolate and condense the scene a little more. And acceptance. Hollow Tree House. I love the sense of isolation here and the general atmosphere of decay and neglect. One can picture how idyllic this must have looked in the past, and there is an unspoken story here about what once was, but is no longer. I might have preferred a little more width to the shot, as I'm sure there is more to the scene than shown here, but the overall treatment, colour palette and composition is still very appealing. In terms of print quality, there has been a bit of colour shift between the original exposure and the final print. There is less warmth in the print, and the colour palette has shifted towards yellow with less brightness. Highly commended. Autumn Walk. Great colours here, and you've really captured the sense of what autumn is about. The foliage is at just the right stage with enough leaves still on the trees and plenty left to carpet the ground. The ground clearly slopes to the right, but the image actually looks better with a compensating tilt to the left. Sometimes with sloping ground our images look best by manipulating the degree of slope. The key is finding a balance between what was there and what looks better. A merit. Mist in the understory. This is a great off the beaten track image giving the viewer an insight into a landscape which has evolved over time. The undergrowth, overgrown tree stumps, and the misty background all combine to produce an evocative image full of intrigue. It has that extra appeal which makes the viewer linger, and that is what we always aim to achieve. Nice shot. Merit. Tea house. Some people build their houses to blend in with the environment. This certainly isn't one of those. However, the owner has successfully ensured that no one will miss this tea house, and the red paintwork makes it a burst of colour in an otherwise natural setting. Red is always a plus in photographer world, and this image really catches the eye. It is well composed and sharp, with interesting secondary characteristics which frame the building very nicely. Very sharp, it keeps our interest as we explore its various nooks and crannies. Honours. Up and away. Nice and crisp. You have managed to freeze the motion here and capture a lot of detail despite the motion of the bird. A little cropped off the top and left-hand side would focus more on the bird, but that's a minor criticism. One thing you might try is reversing the image so that the bird is taking off in the other direction. We read and look at images from left to right, and sometimes it helps to adjust our shots to reflect that. Not something to try if any writing is involved. Honours. Morning walk. Certainly not what I see on a morning walk, and it is a breathtaking view. The landscape here is impressive, but difficult to capture adequately in monochrome. Much of the detail here is differentiated by both texture and colour, and when you take away the colour aspect, you need to be able to make up for that loss by relying on the texture, light and dark instead. The digital version perhaps manages this better than the print, because in the latter we find the features tend to merge together. Perhaps try entering the image as a colour version, and I imagine that would convey more of what is clearly an impressive view. An acceptance. Winter's afternoon. An overcast day with rain can produce good lighting, and the rain tends to bring out textures and lift images. This is an image which conveys the dreariness that such a day brings, and clearly not one for lunchtime suntan. As a record of the time and place, it works well, and the leading lines at each side draw us inwards. However, there isn't really a lot to maintain our gaze, as it has too many competing elements. Our eyes tend to wander around the image without settling, much like those lunchtime workers. An acceptance. Web bridge. The web bridge is something of an architectural favourite, and many photographers have chosen this as their subject. This is an interesting angle, and the monochrome treatment suits it well. The lack of people also helps, as there is nothing to distract the eye from the creation. The lighting is good, and it draws us into the centre and then leads us out the right-hand pathway. This is another image where the move from digital to print has lost a lot of detail and brightness, and if you compare the two side by side, that loss is quite evident. However, as I am assessing this based on the print rather than the digital, that's just another observation for next time. As the print stands, it has a slightly threatening atmosphere which is appealing in of itself, and it adds a new emotional direction to the location. An interesting interpretation of a familiar location. Highly commended. Brickenden Barn. This is a really nice composition of an intriguing building. I quite like the two types of hay bales, the square ones more common in my youth, and the round ones which seem to be in vogue today. The monochrome approach suits it well, reflecting the age and the aura of bygone days. The printing has let it down a bit if you compare the original digital image and the print. The print has lost detail in the shadows, and if you look in the shadows, there is less to see. If you are printing this at home, you might like to revisit your settings, as you really do want your images to do justice to your original image. A merit.